my friends, host Eric here, talking with famous people, and in this video I'd like to talk a little bit about purpose and framing. I was thinking about a teleological frame, which is, in philosophy terms, simply means a thing understood by way of conformity to its purpose, such that a hammer is a good hammer insofar as it hammers well and serves its purpose of hitting things with a hammer. It's kind of a narrow frame by which one might understand things, and it's questionable as to how much utility the information one gleans from it is. But as I was musing about it, thinking about the conversation I had had the other night with Boris ENTP, I was struck that really all disputes boil down to the question of what is the purpose of, or some other purpose-related question. So when we're talking, when Boris was saying, well, he'd feel more comfortable if there wasn't any magical thinking element in it, because he's concerned that I might turn to it when I'm tired or whatever, that it's sort of a blanket justification for things. But really what that issue there is purpose. What is the purpose of the discourse in the first place? So, my purpose in discourse is more than singular, but it's least of all to defend my prized beliefs, usually. And I guess that would be the key point to make there, is simply that it wouldn't be a matter of where in what stage of the conversation about topic X do I collapse down to magical thinking. It would be about which topics am I really engaged in dialectic, in other words, discourse designed to provide clarity on the truth, rather than to win any point or make a point or defend. So in that regard, how I argue is going to be dependent upon the purpose of the arguing. If I'm arguing for something that I feel very personally attached to and I need to win it for personal reasons, and I'm not interested in fighting a fair fight or anything like that, then I'll argue differently than if I'm arguing in a public discourse space like TwFP/2. Slash TwFP2, a period out in /TwFP2, the raw room, which records all the conversations for raw footage for whatever. So so in that instance, when you're dealing with somebody who, as Boris is saying, is being intellectually dishonest, well, there's probably a different purpose implicit in the affirmation. So I've had conversations where I'm asking a question to try to pin them down on something so that I can move forward and dismantle some wrongness of theirs. And they'll say, where are you going with that? Well, it's because we have conflicting ideas of what the purpose of asking questions is. That I think, or the purpose of the conversation in general, the purpose of making advocacies and stating claims and arguing positions and stuff. So this woman that I'm thinking about in the example, she felt as though stating political opinions was something that we were designed to either agree on or not to discuss further. And she didn't want to have her position picked apart at all. Because for her, stating things is an expression of self. It's not doing argumentation in the objective world. It's saying, this is part of who I am. And so if you reject it, then you're rejecting them. The purpose of making affirmations in general is very different. It's not to test ideas, it's to express pieces of yourself for consideration of others, which they can either affirm or if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all, I guess. It's a teleological dispute, then, on some grounds, in that we don't have the same understanding of purpose. So the same thing's true of the God question. The reason that God is necessarily an argument to be made is that even though we can't define God, we can understand which question God would answer. God would answer the question, what is the teleology of human beings? What are we purposed to do? And, or specifically, what am I purposed to do? And this question of purpose is significant and central to all human questions. There was a long period of human history where might makes right was not just a descriptive understanding of things, but more or less a normative understanding of things. Well, he's the king, so that's the right thing to do, And now, in more or less, in varying degrees, it's still a descriptive thing, but much less so. And in free societies, by and large, no. Might doesn't make right, at least in my exchanges with my fellow citizens. So that's an indication of how a question of human purpose is central to questions of governance, of society, of all of our beliefs and perspectives and everything, right? It's like, what are humans in general purposed to do or not do? What is contrary to some correct understanding of being a human, and what is consistent with it? And the question of, well, why is it correct or why is it incorrect? Like, how do we know there is anything like that? Well, those are the sort of questions that God would answer were we to accept God as an answer. Of course, one will point out that acceptance of God doesn't provoke or promote any agreement, by and large, between individuals as to what humans' purpose is. There's much more agreement about what we ought not do. And that question of ought, the normative question of morality and ethics, it is possible to attain a ethics by a rationality that's a negative ethics that says these are things one ought not do, and this is why it's logically so that we ought embrace this ethics, because we have to compare against alternatives, and these are some binary matters that need to be, one must take a position on one way or the other if one's going to be discussing morality at all, or if one wishes to dismiss morality, then one must say that all actions are equally valid, while concurrently not ever behaving as such. Because people who argue against sort of an objective morality will say, well, it's not objective because it's not a physical object or something, neglecting the fact that they make all sorts of arguments all the time that are predicated on certain assumptions that logically infer, from which one can logically infer the ethics of which I speak. But regardless, that's not the point. The point is that if you want to understand what your purpose to do, or what it means to have some sort of destiny beyond fulfilling individual desires and whims and not harming other people, then there needs to be some sort of source external to the self that has the answers to those questions, that knows what that plan is, or whatever. So, the fact that we can ask those kind of questions about objects means we can ask them about ourselves. The fact that we can ask regarding agency questions about will and intention, and therefore purpose, means we can ask them about, it means that we necessarily assume that to the extent that we're asking questions about ourselves being purposed, it's purposed by something capable of intention and will, namely an agent of some sort. But, of course, being an agent that would necessarily be capable of answering all those questions, and especially one that would attend to the destiny, so to speak, of myriad distinct individual agents, and there's no reason to assume that it would be limited only to humans. It could easily include all living agents. Then you've got something that defies any comprehensible compacting. It's beyond words to talk about, because it has the answer to all the questions that defy answers in words. So that doesn't mean that God exists, quote unquote. It means that we are creatures whose lives and fundamental questions and areas of development and areas of success and failure and all that kind of stuff all linked to purpose. Everything always does. The purpose to agential action, willed action, intentionality. So you said that stuff's not intentional, we deem it sort of a bug. Like, it messes up our whole understanding of things like liability and responsibility and duty and liberty and all those kind of concepts. They all stem ultimately from a universal notion that individuals are purposed beings, that we will that which we do by and large, and therefore own some degree of accountability, I guess, is one of the necessarily following impacts of it, you know? What time is it? 3:15. I've got plenty of time to get to work. So, yeah. The other thing about questions of purpose is they're deeply linked to any analysis of the cognitive functions. You know, the purpose of NI and SI as an expression of self is the same, which is knowledge for an individual to incorporate into a cognitive process that involves knowledge, judging, action, interfacing. But when you try to break it down further, you can say that the purpose of NI truths are to eliminate the misleading bias of the self and to know beyond one's own experience. The purpose of SI truths are to eliminate the inaccuracies of the universal and make sure that the truths one has are as ergonomically perfect as possible. Neither of those strategies works in isolation of the other. One needs both universal understandings that the world is as it is and subject to rules, and subjective understandings, that is, my experience provides me guidance as to how I deal with shit and how situations play out for me, and those particulars are ultimately what matters more than the universals. So even if they're less reliable form of knowledge to go off of. When we look at different kinds of action, well, why do we call both extrovert intuition and extrovert sensing action functions? Because they both cause newness, basically. They're both purposed to cause change. Either change in meanings, in ideas, in words, in perspectives that are shared between people, or change in a situation, prompting the rendering of old meanings invalid and the need for new meanings to be made. If meanings didn't link back to experience, they would just always be exercising conditionality. For meaning to carry weight, it has to have impact. So for meaning to have impact, it's got to link in some ways to your life. It doesn't matter if I hypothetically won a tournament in my head if I did this conditionally, but it does if I actually won a tournament. And if I didn't do some of the stuff that I conditionally thought I should have done and was going to do, and I didn't follow through, and didn't do the SE, didn't do the doing part, then the actual change isn't ever manifest. And I can then do more ideation about how I wish I would have done it differently. But each of those things requires, in order for it to be distinguished from the other things, requires us to frame out its purpose in some regard. There's not really any other way to meaningfully provide enlightening insight onto something. It's like, well, what's introverted thinking? It's attention that, if isolated, would be considered to be purposed towards disinterested calculus, purposed towards providing a resolution between conflicts of interest by fairness. Or, well, let's look at it from the objective third-party perspective. I know you both want what you want, both you say you deserve what you deserve, and yet these things are exclusive of one another. Who actually is deserving and why? People who are not interested, who have no interest in the outcome, meaning they're not going to get or lose anything from it, are able to evaluate things based on, or as though no specific parties were involved, but just two stand-in variable people of equal stature and whatever. So that process of removing interest from the equation, looking at it just purely on a logical validity standpoint, that's called introverted thinking. Some people pay attention like that a lot more than other people. Well, you could frame those people as purposed via like a socio, like Socionics does, and says, well, they're purposed to provide the logical calculus for the group, to check the ambitions of those who pursue their own interests at the expense of fairness. Again, all these values that necessarily come up when discussing something like this link back to purpose. Well, why is it important to be fair? Well, because of morality reasons, amongst others. You could say karma or something like that, payback's a bitch. One way or another, you're going to get to a utilitarian or a deontological answer. That is to say, it's wrong because it's wrong, and it violates some normative prohibition, and that's all we need to know. Or it's wrong because it causes harms. My position is basically things that violate normative prohibitions ultimately cause harms, even if they appear to cause benefits in the short run. It's not it's not beneficial to justify outcomes to justify the rights violation, or to justify your bad behavior by pointing to what it is designed to attain as being a desirable outcome. I don't think anytime that people do that, they're running afoul of something fundamental. And I think that we can have both, as long as we remember that we can't have both all the time. You can have a fair basketball league where every team has got pretty good parity, but it's not going to stop you from having a winner and a loser each season. And sometimes you're going to get a year where a team's got a bad squad and they lose most of their games badly. That doesn't mean there's something broken about the system. It just means that's one of the products of the system. We don't want to mess with the system to try to make it more equal, because those new, it's balanced. A balanced system will produce outliers on either side. So, again, this is a frame of purpose. Like, what's the purpose of public policy? What's the purpose of advocacies? What's the purpose of law? What's the purpose of talking about society and having any of these kind of conversations about individuals, about different types of people, about feminists, about MGTI, about whatever? Well, the purpose of it is to get to the truth on some level. And what does that mean? Well, a winning argument, or the resolving answer, an answer that resolves something that's been unresolved prior to that answer. It's asking you to evaluate truth on a feeling, really, a feeling of satisfactoriness in something, that now we understand something we didn't used to understand. When I say we, I mean to the extent that it's a truth that's truly resolutional, then provided there's adequate information fluidity, which there is in the modern world, we ought to expect it to win favor, win broad favor in keeping with its strength argumentationally. So, it's a lot of stuff on purpose, but I would suggest that it's pretty obvious to most of us that there are good and evil in the world. We can point to examples of evil, no problem. Pointing to examples of good is a little bit more difficult, but I tend to default to a notion that in the absence of evil, people are basically good. And it's odd then that we behave as though these moral realities were objective, that our outrage is justified by something outside of us, not by our own whim, right? We don't act as though when we see an atrocity that, look, I know some people think this atrocity is okay and everything, and those people can certainly commit these atrocities if they want to, but no reasonable person does that in the face of something that's morally appalling. So then the question lies, well, okay, it's objective argument. Why does it have to link to God? Well, because, it's not just the thing you're observing that's objective, namely the actual action. It's the fact that it's wrong that's objective. it's as objective as anything can be. It has plenty of physical components to it. You experience physical revulsion and stuff. It's as close to universal as it can be. It's like nobody would dispute that suffering objectively occurs, and that suffering connotes something undesirable. So then the question becomes, well, why is it wrong to create undesirable things intentionally? It's sort of definitionally wrong, right? I mean, the fact that we are capable of having conversations about that sort of thing, the fact that we are capable of designating things acceptable and unacceptable in varying ways and degrees, it tells us that conceptually these statuses exist. Now, the key point that I think most non-theists or atheists or whatever would say is, all of this stuff, Eric, doesn't prove anything about God. It just talks about the challenges of understanding morality in a human society that has no external authority to turn to for guidance. Well, see, that's not true either, because people do turn to an external authority for guidance all the time, called God. Well, but why is that a reason to believe he exists? Well, it's not. It's just it just satisfies a lot of, it answers a lot of questions that, or it allows you to have a satisfactory stopping point for a lot of questions that otherwise would need an answer and it would drive you insane, maybe. So, I don't know. Believe whatever you want, I don't give a fuck. You can believe in Christ, you can believe in Buddha, believe in Christ, you can believe in Boo Christ, you can believe in Acutron, God of quality in objects. That's it for this video. If you'd like to talk to me about typology, have me type you, talk to you about your life, talk about purpose, whatever, with you, then that's available for the low price of $60 for an hour session, and you can purchase that at TwFPcollectibles.com. You also get my book there, Exciting Tables and Words About Human Personality, which is a compilation of standalone documents that I've used in various videos, detailing things about different types. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese.